China and Peru have agreed to deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership. This is the central message of a joint statement just released by the presidents of the two countries. On Thursday, President Xi arrived in Lima, capital of Peru, to attend the 31st APEC Leaders Meeting and pay an official state visit to the Andean nation. He has held talks with his host, Peruvian President Dina Boluarte. By the way, you should see the welcoming ceremony and how he was escorted to the presidential palace. Grand is an understatement. So before his arrival, a signed article by President Xi was published in the Peruvian newspaper El Peruano. In the article, President Xi confirmed that China is ready to work with Peru to champion true multilateralism, promote an equal and orderly multipolar world, and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization. However, this vision comes amid rising global uncertainties and tensions. We don't need to go into the specifics there. And the elephant in the room is the re-election of US President Donald Trump, who appears to be stacking his future cabinet with hawks and hardliners. So what exactly is China saying to the people in Peru and beyond? Is China coupling that with action? Amid the uncertainties, how important is China's consistency in its Asia-Pacific policy? Welcome to The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm pleased to be joined from Darwin, Australia by Daryl Guppy, former National Board member of Australia-China Business Council. From Peru by Professor Carlos Aquino, Director of the Center for Asian Studies at the National University of San Marcos. From Beijing by Zhou Mi, Deputy Director of the Institute of American and Oceania Study at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. And in the studio by Aina Tangen, Senior Fellow of Taihe Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So let's start with the excitement, the optics. I love the optics. And Peru pulled out all the stops, you can say, in welcoming President Xi. It seems he got the full red carpet treatment with the cavalry regiment and horses and all. Professor Carlos Aquino, let me go to you. Why such a grand welcome?
Well, I think it is well deserved for President Xi Jinping. I think Peru is the closest country in Latin America to China, not only in economic terms. China is our biggest trade partner. Already 30% of our trade go to China, 36% of our export go to China. China is the biggest foreign investor in Peru. Probably 1/4 of all foreign investors in Peru come from China. And not only that, Peru was the first country in Latin America to receive large-scale Chinese immigration from 1849. That's why Peru has the largest community of Chinese people of Chinese origin in Latin America, and we established a diplomatic relationship in 1874 with the Qing Empire, and with the People's Republic of China. We were the third country in Latin America after Cuba and Chile, and that's all. So, and we hope this relationship politically, economically, historically will increase with time.
May I follow up just very quickly, because you're the only Peruvian guest I have here. Why such a good relationship? Why such a momentum and this overwhelming hospitality for the Chinese president? Is there a traditional link? Is there a civilizational commonality in our cultural genes?
Chinese, we said Chinese of Peruvian or Chinese origin probably is around 5 or 10% of the population. So we feel very close to Chinese. In fact, Peru is a people of multi-ethnic origin, so just Chinese is one of the origins, ethnic origin. So I guess Chinese also feel that way in Peru. When they came here, they feel happy to do business with us that with other countries. Besides that, the political relationship is very close. The last 2-3 presidents, the first country to visit was China, in recognition of the China growing importance. So in every aspect, even in food, Chinese food, call it here chifa, chow fang, is very popular. It's one of the most popular things. So you can find many communities, perhaps even said probably that the origin of the American people is coming from Mongolia, from China. Yeah, you can look at any angle, and really we are very close to China.
I certainly learned a lot by when I'm doing research on this topic. And as I promised, here are some key ideas of the joint statement of the two presidents of the two countries. And this just in, okay, right before I came into the studio. So I'm just going to read very quickly. The two countries, after the two presidents, after their meeting, they reached a broad consensus. For instance, they're upgrading their comprehensive strategic partnership, and they emphasize that a joint action plan from 2024 to 2029 will be implemented together because it's very important for the development of the two countries. The two sides stress that China's development will provide new opportunities for developing countries such as Peru, and China support Peru to find its own socioeconomic path, one that is suitable to the realities on the ground. They also agree to continue to push for facilitation of trade. They have upgraded, of course, officially signed a document to upgrade their free trade agreement, and they will also continue to cooperate on large-scale infrastructure projects to promote economic and regional integration, of course, while stressing on transparency and clean development. Of course, all of these have to be in line with laws and regulations of the local circumstances. They are congratulating the Chancay port for its successful opening in making Peru a world-class logistics, technological and industrial center, and that is an important step to to strengthen the trade relationship between Latin America and Asia. So let me go to Daryl there in Australia, sitting in Australia, looking at this. What's the significance of China coming closer to Latin America for Australia in the middle? What does that mean?
It's significant because President Xi has reconfirmed his commitment to multilateralism. And as we will talk about later, that stands in strong contrast to what President Trump is going to bring to the table. And that's the key challenge in both this Peru and China relationship and in the APEC meeting.
Mr. Zhou, do you think these messages, although President Trump is not there yet and it's still President Biden attending, do you think China is kind of speaking to the future American administration as well? Of course, to the audiences around the world from the global south.
Yeah, I agree that China is also very pacific on these kind of ideas that we should try and stick to the true multilateralism. It is very important for us to try to find some better way to deal with some of the differences opinions, but we can do that only by the cooperation. So no matter which governments are there in the White House, that the market of the world is still trying to find some confidence by the cooperation. So it's very important for us to still trying to find a better way to resolve some of the problems. If we are not able to do that, most of these other economies, they have the opportunities and the abilities to fulfill their commitments in the multilateral system, like in WTO.
Of course, but it seems that one of the biggest players in the region has a different opinion. And actually, in the article that President Xi published before his arrival, he said this, and I found it to be very interesting. He said, the world is undergoing faster transformation unseen in a century. Humanity has again come to a crossroads in history. Well, this is nothing new. He said this multiple times. But this analogy he's using, he said, to fully appreciate the grandeur of the Nazca lines, we must view them from a height, because at the ground level, their true splendor remains hidden from view. Aina, why do you think he's invoking this imagery to drive down this point?
Well, in history, when you're sitting in the situation, it's really hard to get a complete handle on it. And what you have here is China has three principles in terms of development, security, and civilization. Civilization equates to respect for each civilization. And it's about shared values versus make America great again at the expense of everybody else. So there's very, very different visions. So when you start, when you're on the ground level, it can be very emotional. But once you get up 10,000 feet, all of a sudden you see where the lines are going. This port, Chancay port, is a groundbreaking issue. Here you have a port that is opening up the entire west coast of South America not only to China, because everyone tries to make this about China. This can go to Japan, it can go anywhere. It can go to Mexico, it can go to Canada. It is something that is going to reduce costs and time by about 30%. And part of that will go anywhere. So if it's going to Japan or South Korea or ASEAN, it's all going to benefit everybody. And this is the whole point, a shared future versus one that only has one target in mind.
Professor Aquino, how do you look at the invocation of this imagery of the Nazca lines? What do you think President Xi is trying to say here? And do you think the messages are clear? You know, he said we need to look at history from a certain height, but what exactly are the crossroads we are faced with? Do you think people in Peru, in Latin America, understand the stark differences we're looking at?
Well, Peru and China are one of the two oldest civilizations in the world. Of course, China have more than 5,000 years of history. Also Peru. I think that is the point of President Xi Jinping. We are improving relations between countries with a very long history. Peru have a very long history. Inca Empire probably is better known, but Inca Empire was just a very short empire from the 14th century to the 16th century. But before we have very, very old culture. So
absolutely.
I think this is very old civilization came close together. And you know, there were, I forgot to say, you know, during the 16th century to the beginning of the 19th, there was the Manila galleon trade. Okay, so silver from Peru and Mexico went to Macau, and then goods from China and Asia came to here. So we have a very long historical relationship. And the older the civilization, I think the more near we feel. People with all culture, with all civilization, I think feel closer to each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, the two presidents have inaugurated the Chiang Kai megaport, which is 80 kilometers north of the capital, Lima. President Xi said in the capital that it will also help build an Inca trail of the new era with the Chiang Kai port as its starting point, that boosting the overall development and inauguration of the region. Darryl, how do you read his term for the project, that there is an Inca trail of the new era? Of course, he also talked about a new land and sea corridor between Asia and Latin America. Is that going to benefit countries such as Australia, such as the other Asia-Pacific countries?
It will certainly benefit the entire APEC region. That's important. But more importantly, perhaps, it impacts on the entire east coast of Latin America because it provides a single port logistics opportunity which will allow and enable much greater exports both to and from Latin America. So it engages Peru in particular, but Latin America more broadly, into the global trade system and particularly within the APEC region. That's what President Xi means when he talks about the Inca trade lines, because traditionally the Inca had widespread trade networks throughout Latin America. So it's an extension of that into the APEC region and an inclusion of Peru to a greater extent within the global economy. It's consistent with the Global Development Initiative that President Xi outlined in 2022.
Professor, Mr. Zhou, this port is said to be able to reduce shipping time by 10 days to 23 days between Peru and Shanghai, for instance, and reduce shipping cost by about 20%. And there is an expected annual revenue of 4.5 billion, some kind of 8,000 direct jobs will be created. What does that mean in terms of economic opportunity, not just for Peru, but also for Brazil, for instance, which is stepping up its infrastructure connectivity with Peru westward?
Yeah, I agree with you that the logistics is a very important factor if you are looking in the international trade and economic development. In the past several years, logistics are under a lot of pressures by the geopolitical tensions or some of the natural disasters. So the logistics is very important for us to improve the trade. When we are able to connect more safely and with less cost, I think that stakeholders will try to use these lines more frequently, and that is definitely will reduce the efficiency Well, as Latin American countries are having so many different products, they can try to accumulate in such a kind of important port and also transport in more efficient ways. I noticed that for this port is not only owned by Chinese company, actually it is joint ventures by Chinese company and the Peruvian companies. So we share these benefits together and we create more jobs and also improve the technology of transportations and also improve a lot of opportunities for companies. Maybe we can have a better improvement in the coming years, and that's definitely very good to reduce the cost and trying to make the quality of the products even better.
Well, definitely the two sides have the two presidents have congratulated the opening of the port and thinking this is a very important step. And yet there are some people who are questioning, of course, the port, saying that, China is building a web of ports around the world to hamper Western militaries looking to move ships and supplies into the Indo-Pacific. Aina, yeah, you're giggling here. Your response?
Well, I mean, this is exactly what Washington does. It's fallen behind. It ignored South America. In fact, Donald Trump, the last time around, basically said they're all criminals and they just want to come to America and to take what we have, our jobs, etc. So there's no love lost there. The question is, how it goes forward. Will the U.S. continue to use security as a blunt instrument to try to beat China down? And frankly, I just don't think it's working. When you have something that is groundbreaking, remember, this port was put together, started in 2021 as a project. It's been finished today. You look at projects in the United States, that is an impossibility to do something this big. And it's not just about the
not
port
even
itself.
for their own country.
No, I could tell you stories, but we don't have enough time. But what's really important here is this was a $1.3 billion investment to build one of the top-notch.
Reportedly, yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to be about a $3.5 billion total investment, because they're also putting in a processing area, a development area. Really important, because the curse of having resources is that you export the resources, but you don't add value to them. And now they'll have the ability to do that. Chinese machines can go there.
Yeah, that's the big question here. Some people would say, look, China is importing, let's face it, and China is transparent about it, raw material, copper, iron ore. Why is China helping Peru to process, to put added value to its exports? I'm going to ask this question to Professor Aquino. What do you think is China's logic behind what it's doing in your country?
Before that, let me tell you something. As have been said, this Chancay port is a joint venture between Costco Shipping Port that have 60% and a Peruvian company, Volcan, is 40%. But you know what is the funny thing of this? In the year 2009, Volcan company came to the idea of building a port. They offered first this project to investors in Europe and United States, and nobody paid attention to that. So they went to look for Chinese. So United States companies had the opportunity to do the job, but they didn't do that. Okay. Anyway, we expect from the Chancay port not only, of course, to export more goods to China, because the time will be shorter, it will be cheaper to go. So we will buy also cheaper goods from China and for that matter from Asia. But of course, we want to improve our export, not only export the raw material reserve, because up to now 95% of our export to China and Asia are just natural reserve. We want to do in the export processing zone in Chancay, we want to add more value added to goods. And in that sense, also we expect to have also Chinese investment and also investment from other countries. So we need to upgrade our industrial structure. So we hope Chinese technology, Chinese capital will invest that. But in that case, it is open to business. So when somebody says China is investing a lot, of course they are doing that, but Peru is open to business to any country. So that's the idea.
Well, yeah, I just want to provide some latest figures. This just came out after President Xi and President Boluarte's talk. For instance, the trade volume between China and Peru has increased by 1.6 times since 5 years ago, the investment stock of Chinese enterprises in Peru has doubled, and which shows it's not a one-way street. And by the way, trade is really balanced between the two sides. There's not a huge trade surplus or trade deficit between the two parties, and China is enjoying more and more avocado, for instance, from Peru. I must seek them out. I must seek them. I haven't had the chance to taste them, but I'm so happy to hear that, because we're looking for great product. But when the Peruvian president was in China, and that really caught my attention, she almost choked during her interview with our national television with my colleague. I want to show you just this.
Quiero un país donde la niñez tenga futuro.
Yeah. Well, she was talking about that she wants her country to be a country like China, because the way how China lifted people out of poverty, there are hospitals, there are jobs, and so on and so forth. Darryl, how do you think of this? Why do you think the Peruvian president will get so emotional when she's visiting, China?
Like many countries in Latin America, the relationship with America has been one of aggression, of American aggression against Latin American countries and interference. So when you have China coming along and saying, look, we're not interested in an ideological approach or hegemonic approach, we are genuinely interested in multilateral trade, in civilizational relationships, then this is a remarkable change in the approach from one country to another. It is an understanding that each country will choose its own particular development paths that are suitable for its own particular conditions, without ideological strings attached. So, of course, people feel emotional about having this opportunity to come into the global trade system. That's the importance of a relationship between China and Peru. It's the importance that underpins the APEC conference as well.
Do you think that sentiment is a view of the majority among the APEC leaders, and not a source of friction for greater polarization in the future? Darryl?
That's one of the key challenges of the current forum meeting. There will be a subgroup within the APEC group that favours the American approach and American domination of what's happening, as happened in the past. There will be a larger group that is increasingly concerned about that domination taking place and wanting to look at ways to break it. So to some extent, the APEC meeting follows in the footsteps of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting and the BRICS meeting in recent weeks. So this is an opportunity for China to establish a leadership for full support of multilateral solutions. That's going to be the key challenge, because although President Biden is there, it's really what you might call a farewell tour, because no matter what he says or what he does, that's most likely to be overridden by Trump and his current appointees. So this is an opportunity to set the agenda for the future in the immediate term, with a Trump administration coming in that favours protectionist policies and tariffs that have already impacted on economic strength within the region.
Mr. Zhou, how consistent will China's message be? First of all, how consistent has China's messages been, right? President Xi has been speaking to APEC on multiple occasions over the past decade, more than a decade. Has his stance been consistent, and will he consistently advocate the same thing come the next administration in the United States?
Yeah, I think that is very consistent for Chinese government. We speaking about the openness and inclusiveness. I think that if you are looking at China's policies in the past decades, we keep on opening our markets wider and wider. We are trying to improve the connectivities with the foreign market by the trade, the financial services, and also some other of the governance issues. Well, another message is also very clear and sustainable. That is innovation. We support the innovation. We create a lot of platforms and rooms for the companies, no matter where they come from, even from the United States. They are welcome here in China, in Chinese market, to do more, to benefit by the very vast market in China. So I think that is also a very good example if we can show the next administration of the United States that how can one economies to enjoy the willingness of cooperation from other markets. We can only do that by openness, by encouraging innovation, not by the barriers, not by a lot of interference from the government. And that is what the market really expects. They need more stable environment and a better room for development.
Well, at this moment, we're watching news coming out of Washington. Who will be what in the next 4 years? Ina, is incoming President Donald Trump going to engage in a constructive manner with Latin America, with APEC countries? He talks about America first, and he has a certain point that countries should prioritize their national interests. But is there something that's missing too here?
Yeah, putting your national interest at the expense of others in a zero-sum game is not going to work, because you're in essence taking from others. That causes conflict. In terms of Latin America, he's promising to export 15 million, to expel 15 million people who he says shouldn't be in the U.S. A large majority of them are coming from South America, so that's going to happen. Quite frankly, it's more than likely that he will withdraw from APEC, which means that APEC will now be able to go forward. And one final thought. You start looking at the globe and the network of ports and railways, highways, etc. And you'll understand that China has created a framework. If you're an artist, the first thing you do is you sketch out the outlines of what you're doing. And then the next thing you do is color it in. And I think that China will be concentrating more in the future on coloring in, making sure that these networks are very valuable to the countries like Peru, by helping them create these export centers so that they have jobs. Those jobs create income. That income creates choices. Those choices come back sometimes to China.
Well, help people square this. Some people say, why is China spending so much money abroad making these mega ports? They're super expensive and you'll be beholden for like decades. What exactly is China seeing the benefit in these heavy investments abroad? For military purposes? Because that's what some people are saying.
Well, yes, the people who won't invest in South America are saying that there are, nefarious purposes here. But it's very simple. Actually, this is a very good project. They brought it in very low compared to what it would cost if it had been done by the US or Europe. There's going to be a very good return on it. Remember, you mentioned 20% savings in terms of shipping. Actually, I've heard that it's closer to 30%. So you start looking at the cost, the logistics savings on that, and in terms of time, you're really talking about it. And this is going to be a hub for South America, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil. It's going to be an example of how countries go in. And remember, they don't have to go through the Panama Canal anymore, which is heavily influenced by the US. So there's real independence there. They can make their own decision. And it's not about China, it's about the entire world. They have access now.
And Daryl, when APEC has been slashing tariffs, benefiting from trade liberalization, America will do the opposite. In one word, will it really be good for America?
No, ultimately it will not. It's more than one word, but there's a short answer.
Well, I think that's very clear to us, but somehow it doesn't go down to some minds in the world. But it's funny, but on the other hand, it's rather bewildering, right? Seems common sense are not common here at all. Anyway, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my 4 guests: Daryl Gupi joining us from Australia, Carlos Aquino joining us from Peru, Jomi from Beijing, and Ina Tangen here in the studio. Thank you so much. And with that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and X using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got the point.